the guy that's been screwed by everybody.
A lot of times he's the problem.
But there's a guy out in, he stopped me at SEMA and he said, hey, my engine broke and this is how it broke. And he wants an explanation. And I already had talked to the engine builder. I told him why it broke. I helped the man understand why the failure occurred and how to avoid the failure. And then the customer's in front of me and I'm not going to bash that guy. I don't know that guy, but I'm not going to bash that guy. So I'm like, hey, like, you're looking for your answer. I've already given you the answer.
They want you to agree with them.
The engine only breaks that way, this way.
It's like the guy that comes to you and says, hey, I got these parts, I want to use them. And you're like, nah, that won't work because you know it doesn't work. You've tried it. But then he goes down to the next guy and then the next guy. And then finally the one guy that agrees with him and they use whatever he wanted to use. And then when it fails, it's all, well, that guy doesn't know shit.
We have special guest Jay Marr. Welcome back to the Eat Sleep Race podcast. Today, my co-host is Ricky Silva, Ricky CLM, and we have special guest Jay Marr, formerly of Real Street, now RS Garage. He's, I would consider a world-renowned engine builder, tuner, drag racer.
And land speed now, right?
Land speed record holder. Yeah. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Give us a little brief rundown history of how you got into motorsports.
It's probably a lot like most of the people that are in this stuff is you find something you're passionate about and you pursue it and maybe it turns into a career or maybe not. But the guys that are like into cars, they're into cars, you know? Mm-hmm. So I just got into cars when I was young. I was mechanically inclined. There was stuff around my parents' business that needed to be fixed. So I was working on trucks and working on this and working on that, and then just got behind the wheel of something with a little bit of power, and I was just kind of hooked.
And what was that?
It's terrible because I have to really age myself when I say a little bit of power because you're talking about a car that will bottom 90s in the quarter mile.
Yeah,
it's like a 93 Mustang. So
that's not too bad.
But it was it was the early 90s, so there wasn't. Back then, if you had a 12-second car, you were doing something.
Mm-hmm. You were fast.
Things have just gotten, where they are now.
Right. But now you could buy a car that has...
Yeah, the idea of buying a vehicle and learning about the vehicle and building the vehicle and finding parts and maybe breaking it or maybe not. You're breaking something. You go to the track, you try to make it faster. I got all really caught up in that in my teenage years. Okay. And then that turned into working on cars for a living. And then I started to look ahead a bit, and I thought, well, if I'm going to ever start a family, I've got to figure out how to make some money. So that was in my late 20s. And then 27, I think, I started Real Street. And then the progression was to get into the position to be financially stable enough to start a family. And that happened. And, now I am here at 46.
For the Real Street portion, how long was that?
Almost 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm sure everyone here on the podcast knows Real Street's been a staple of the racing, especially drag racing. At that time, you guys were doing a lot of Supras.
Yeah. And
then you guys kind of moved on to different platforms as well, supporting different platforms, but mainly Supra game.
At the time, me and the other owners, we all had Supras. I mean, like, the Supra's the Supra,
Mm-hmm.
So it's, if you're going to look out there, if you're a little bit sophisticated, you may end up with an NSX. If you're a little bit exotic, you may have gotten a GTR over here. But for the most part, the Supra was the
in between,
the kind of like the top of the food chain that you could easily access here in America.
At the time,
that was like the king supercar of that era.
And modified.
Yeah.
It was very
huge aftermarket.
The cars really loaned themselves to being modified.
When you guys first started Real Street, like, where was it? Were you guys like kind of out of like a small garage, or did you guys?
I bought a house when I was 20, and by the time I was ready to start my own business, I had equity in the house, so I pulled out $17,000 or $18,000, and I bought kind of a handful of tools and a bay that a man had gotten hurt and he wasn't going to stay at that business anymore. Okay. So I went into his business, paid him out basically for the tools and to have a turnkey address. And I just started, working on stuff.
So that was like a physical, you basically had a physical shop.
Yeah, because it was like, I worked for the same guy for about a decade, And when that came to an end, I did a few months at Titan, and it wasn't for me. It just wasn't the right fit. And I said, well, I'll just start my own company, because there wasn't anyone else in Orlando that I could work for at the time. So then started Real Street, and then a few months later, well, the timeline may be blurry. It's been a long time, but another dude came on, and he wanted to sell parts. So that was kind of the beginning of the parts segment. And then as the company evolved, there were 3 younger guys that were into the internet. They would work on the parts sales side of it, and I would just be the knowledge base to earn credibility amongst the community.
Okay.
So if a customer had a question or a problem, they could come to me and I could help them move forward. So we were more than just a place to buy a thing. Because when you look at the other places at the time, I think one of the things that really set us apart back then is they had someone that knew something about cars.
You had support.
Yeah,
They had
you had the full support.
Yeah, and people would tear stuff up and
Not
they'd
just
send
selling a
pictures.
part.
Right, and I could help them through, like, hey, this is where this went wrong, try not to do it again type deal. So that was a lot of my role there, was a technical role, and then working on the cars and, tuning cars and testing parts and all
Right.
that kind of thing.
So, and on the Real Street side, you were the original guy.
Yeah.
Okay. And then moving forward, after your partners came on, were you obviously you were still building motors, right?
Yep.
So what building motors? I know you were doing tuning also. What's your happy place?
And I think engines for the most part. I was just on this 2-week trip, East Coast, West Coast, and I took on a couple tuning jobs. And the cars have a lot of variables, and you really are heavily relying on the preparation of the vehicle when you show up to tune it. And there's a lot of unknown things. You don't know what happened to the engine last year. You're working on old stuff. And if the day doesn't go good, then you've got to do some follow-up work. But with the engine, it's a lot of go, no go. You pick the right components. You find a machine shop you trust. They measure. I measure. I put everything together. I know right then exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I can package it and send it down the road, and I know what's there. So I like tuning. It's a lot easier on my body because there's not as much chemical exposure or physical work. But it'd be hard for me to get into tuning to try to make a living again because of the amount of travel involved.
And you're trying to cut back from traveling as much.
Well, it's these blocks, right? Because if you do FL2K, Texas 2K, Imports First Domestics, Bonneville, El Mirage, I'm gone for it's like 2 months.
Yeah.
So if you start stacking tuning work in, even if you only did one a month, then you're
still tied up.
You're still tied up. So it's like my little girl is 7, and the time home with her is
most important. That's priority.
Yeah. So I have way more fun just being home.
Being a dad.
On the road. Yeah, the past couple of weeks it was I got home like 5 a.m. on Wednesday, and I was just like got in my house and felt like I just got out of jail. I was like, I am home. It's nice.
And then that's how it felt after World Cup.
Yeah.
Home after being gone for a week. You're like, finally.
Well, I left World Cup to go to SEMA.
Oh, yeah.
To go to El Mirage, to go back to Vegas to work on a car, to go home. So it was
yeah, you've been on the road for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. So obviously we said formerly Real Street.
Yeah.
If you want to get into it. For as long as I've known you, it's always Jay from Real Street.
Yeah.
So now it's Jay from RS Garage. If you want to dive into what happened, or just, you guys aren't seeing eye to eye on business anymore.
It man, I tell you, it's a big lift, and to get through it all and not feel some kind of way or get tied up in the emotional side of it, it was a ride for me that came to an end. And the differences amongst the people internally, when I look at it of how it started and the mistakes that were made early on, and I look at it how it ended and the mistakes that were made at the end. And it's technically not over yet because there's money involved. There's some other loose ends, and it's like, it's like, I'll consider it good until there's lawyers involved. But for right now, it's just like that situation for me is that's over, and I won't give those guys my time anymore. It's money and men,
Usually what happens.
Yeah. But I tell you,
You had a long ride.
if I look at the opportunity to, like, when I go home, this house that my wife and I built last year, that house wouldn't have been possible without Real Street.
Yeah.
When I look at the toys that I have, like, Real Street is like the centerpiece in my life. So it's a really weird dynamic to have this centerpiece that you put a lot of work into.
That you created.
You were rewarded for it amongst the years. You had, good times, bad times, tough times, whatever. It's just this big experience. But now it's just different for me because it's I just, I don't go there. I don't, I feel some kind of way. Like, I was at World Cup and I'm talking to some customers and I look back and there I am on the monitor at the Real Street booth, and I'm like, oh man, that's weird, isn't it? Like it was weird.
You were the face of that place for forever. That's
For
what
quite some
everyone
time,
knew.
yeah.
All the tech videos you guys used to do, which are still out there.
Yeah.
Tons of good information. I think as a racer and someone in the car community, I think everyone can say that they've learned something from that you have provided. Some nugget of information out there has come from you and, some of those videos you guys used to do.
No, it's all good, man. I think that if you one of the neatest things is I meet a lot of people and they have an expectation to meet the guy that they've learned something from. And once that person and I get to talking, we realize we're just car guys.
Yeah.
So I think that
it's like they say, don't meet your heroes.
well, it's the thing that got me into that company was my passion for automobiles.
Mm-hmm.
And
you met like-minded people.
yeah, but when that
Along the way.
company needed when that company became kind of a corporate infection came about the place where control and making sure that everything was done a certain way to optimize margin and profit.
When everything's about the bottom line.
Tell you
That's
what,
when
I
takes
started
some
to
of the
see
desire out of it.
well, I just became obsolete because they didn't really need me anymore, which that was a tough pill to swallow. But once I saw it, I just said, find the numbers that packaged me out, and it wasn't a good deal, but it was the only deal available without getting into a multi-year fight. And I
Right.
thought, like, there's no way I'm going to go home every day having to earn a living, fighting with some dudes, and trying to keep my head about me.
Yeah.
I'll lose. So the best thing I could have done is just say, like, okay, you win, I lose, I'll leave. That's it.
Now, do you think this also came about too? The big elephant in the room in our industry is obviously EPA.
Yeah, that's influencing it because, I was told, like, don't be seen near a car with a laptop. Don't this, don't that,
The red tape started to come out.
Yeah, the red tape. And I get it because it's real. If
Mhm.
EPA wants to crush you, they can crush you.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have...
It's kind of like playing a game with no
you
rules.
Were you guys ever reached out to by them?
Yeah,
or?
they called.
Oh,
They
yeah.
said, hey, I know who you are. I know
Mhm.
what you're doing. We're going to need some information out of you,
Okay.
and we'll call you. So we provided information, and that was the last we heard of them.
Good.
Because we had another friend of mine in the industry around 2018 said, hey, games are changing.
Mm-hmm.
The EPA can write their own rule book now.
Yeah.
Are you selling any of these devices that are considered high-risk devices? And it was like, no. So we got away.
You were ahead of the
As soon as
curve.
some of the other people started getting popped for like OBD2 stuff, it was already time for us to kind of get our hands off and away from it
Mhm.
because the writing was on the wall.
Right.
You can't. A question that I would ask someone in the EPA is like, do you care about my 94 Toyota? Or do you care about the 2024 Cummins that the dude's about to cut the particulate filter off of? Because I would leverage to say he doesn't care about my 94 Toyota.
Yeah.
They definitely hammered the diesel industry, it seems like, pretty heavily. But there have been quite a few people in our industry that we've heard of, obviously like local to us, like Jeff Evans was one of the first one, Evans Tuning, that got like that was probably one of the higher profile cases that we heard about.
And that was
but
like
every
that was
now and
way
then,
early too.
yeah, every
Yeah,
now and then you
Before,
hear
like, there was
it was
ever
probably like somewhere between like 2012 to like 14, 15 around there is when his thing I think happened. But then every now and then you kind of, it's like the unspoken thing where someone, you're like, oh, this shop got contacted or this shop got in trouble.
You know, when you say elephant in the room, it's like
Yeah.
a lot of people are really uncomfortable talking about it. And,
Yeah.
it's
it just sucks because, like you said, it's one of those things where there's no rules, like there's no guidelines to follow. Like, how do we know we're doing something wrong? Or, you know, with all these other agencies out there, I'm in the gun industry. I know we have guidelines that we have to follow, right? We have to stay within the laws. There's no laws with EPA almost.
It's not true though. If you the things that get weird are the years of the vehicle skip around depending on where it's at in the states. So like in California, there's vehicles in the 60s that had some level of smog control.
Oh, okay.
And which is funny because if you read about LA, they ripped up the train system. They ripped up public transportation to sell cars, and then they put devices on cars because smog got out of control pretty quick.
Yeah, LA's
So,
bad.
you know, then you go like 78 is a pretty hard year. You know, 96 is another hard year because of OBD2.
Because OBD2, yeah.
Yeah, but it's weird though because if your grandmother gave you a 85 box Chevy and the catalytic converter was bad, you go down to the do-it-yourself auto parts store, you get a replacement catalytic converter. That vehicle is now illegal because it was certified with
that particular
the OEM converter. So it's not that there's not clarity on the law. They painted over it with a huge roller that says like all of this against the rules. So, you know, again, the diesel stuff is probably the highest offender.
right.
But I think if you look at it over the span of 5 to 7 years, the EPA did get to look extensively through our market. There's a large majority of businesses that were, requests for information. They understand our market.
So they did research.
Oh, for sure. But if there's not enough money in our market to satisfy their operating costs, they have to look elsewhere.
Right.
And if they just squish us, they just put people out of jobs, which isn't good either.
Right.
So it's just kind of one of those things. Like, I think that you'll see, and we have seen a shift of focus. You know, they have to look for
Bigger fish.
Bigger fish. Yeah, we're small fish.
Yeah.
I mean, the gun industry is a small fish. The car industry is smaller than the gun industry, arguably. So we're just small fish. We're just dudes that are into cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dudes into their hobbies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So right now, you're transitioned into RS Garage.
Yep.
What are some of the services? Like, what is RS Garage for the guys that listen that don't know?
RS Garage is going to be hopefully a way for me to make a run at retirement, because if I can continue, I don't care if I'm ever rich, but I'd like to continue my lifestyle. I'd like to continue to be able to afford to play with cars. I'd like to stay in my house. I'd like to get, the opportunity to go to events. I'd like to get racing a car again. So now we're 5 guys. Well, four guys and 1 girl. My oldest daughter, she's kind of like in the office.
Okay.
And she's helping out a bunch. And she goes to some events with me and stuff. But then I have a couple of the guys that I worked with previously at Real Street. They came on. And then Luis, the video guy I was with at Real Street, he came on. So right now it's I jokingly can say that if you've ever seen that Bernie Sanders meme where he's like, I come to you again for your support. It's like, man, I could use the help now because I have to get this other business. I have to get this business running.
Mm-hmm.
So Mo is a sales guy that I met in Dubai.
Okay.
And him and I immediately got into pretty heavy conversation about the culture, not only car culture, but culture, because now we're a couple of car guys.
Right.
So we already have a bridge to have conversation, and we start talking about world policies and all this heavy stuff, and we just became friends. So when I was leaving Real Street, he came to me and he said, "Hey man, I know that there's some things you can't talk about right now, but whenever you're ready, I'm ready to come work with you."
Okay.
So a couple months ago, he said, "Hey, time's up. I'm ready if you're ready." I said, "Yeah, come on." So this dude's a machine. He speaks 3 languages. He could outwork just about anybody. He was repeatedly the highest producing sales guy at Real Street. So he's on board now. And I got my eye on one other sales guy that I hope that I can bring in March. That's kind of my next. I've been trying to look at this thing under 6-month blocks.
Okay.
So the first 6 months, I did my best to just kind of like get the boiling water off the pot, slow everything down, get my head right. And then August, or so, by August, I was back into working again. So building engines, because it's a fairly easy way for me to pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoy the work. If I go to work and build an engine, it's a very satisfying day for me. I really enjoy the work, and I know what I'm doing. So it's easy work for me.
So it's still a lot of 2J stuff?
Yeah, a lot of 2J stuff. There's been some odd stuff through.
Yeah, I've seen some videos.
Yeah, we got a couple killer domestic projects that we're working on. We got a 69 Camaro with this 930 horse NA LS with ITBs on it.
Wow.
And then there's a 66 Mustang that's coming in. That's Job Spetter's car that's going to get a NASCAR RY45 engine.
Wow.
Like a full cup engine. The thing goes 150 in the quarter on the engine now. So now it's going to get another couple hundred horsepower. So it'll be a pretty wild.
That's naturally aspirated as well?
Aspirated.
I've seen a couple pictures he's posted of that project. That's definitely some pretty cool stuff.
When
going
you
on
look
there.
in the exhaust port, it's nothing but valve. It's a gorgeous engine.
How did you and Joe meet?
Oh, like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were banging around. Well, Joe back in the day was like the best. Well, I would argue the guy is still the best, but he was like the best guy for tuning.
From Turbo People.
Back then, nobody was doing. A few people were doing it, but nobody got it like Job. Job is a different level.
I met
So-
Job years ago from our other friend, Gary Gardella,
Yeah,
when he had the Civic. And it's funny because, like, back then, too, during that time, it's kind of like, yeah, who's your tuner? Who's doing this? And then when he said this guy, Job, I'm like, who's that? He's like, Turbo People. Sounds like they know what they're doing. And obviously they
Yeah.
did, because that car broke a lot of records.
yeah. No, he's Job grew up in it. His father,
Yeah, senior.
Senior is probably one of the most incredible men I've ever met. He always just has the answer. He's just one of those guys that always has the answer. Neat dude.
So now that you get to work with, I mean, I feel like you're always around like-minded people, smart, and I don't think you're ever ashamed to say, like, oh, this guy's smarter than me, like, because you're always learning.
Yeah.
I see that, like, you pass that through your videos and stuff. So now, are you gonna, when it comes down to the tuning side of things, how do you do that now? Is it like, because you're gonna be picking and choosing? You're not gonna tune every single car out there that calls you.
There's a young man in town. His name is Freddie. It's like spec tuned, and he was coming to rent the Dyno at Real Street for a couple of years, and him and I interact really well. So I refer a lot of work to him, and if he has a question, I help him. Like I would like to. He'll travel, and I won't travel the way he's traveling. So I try to refer a lot of work to Freddie. If something's really cool, or I'm interested in it, or it's a vehicle that I've previously worked on, then I'll be open to it. But I can't just like I can't go on the road.
You're at the point where you could be more selective now with what you get involved with.
Yeah.
Not everything needs your level of attention right away. Where, like you said, a guy like him that knows how to tune, he can handle the project. Or if it's something a little more advanced or kind of something that kind of strikes that interest in you, you're going to be like, oh, you know what? I'll handle this one.
Or it's friends.
Yeah.
I had some really good times travel tuning.
Mm-hmm.
Like you meet people and you're just you're just friends now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, lifelong friends.
yeah. So if someone, like I like Grenada a lot. Like I like to go down there and work.
Mhm.
Like it was a fun deal. The racetrack.
Yeah.
The
like
dirt road.
yeah, it's cool. So
Yeah.
I'd go back there, but there's some places that I definitely wouldn't go back. But I think for the most part, it's going to be getting re-engaged with the tech videos, trying to generate sales leads, and building engines kind of as the staple thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I have 3 RB26 projects in process right now,
Okay.
and I always kind of like looked at that engine as the other, and I never considered it a candidate up against the JZ because they have 2 very different packaging and engineering programs. The RB is a circuit engine, whereas the JZ, it's like they kind of knew that the Americans were going to end up putting big dumb turbos on them or something. 'Cause they're pretty tough. But just working on some of those engines, and then I got a little EK hatch that I'm going to turbocharge with my daughter. It's a B16A now.
Okay.
And she drives it, and she's like, it's really slow. And I said, okay, well, we'll turbocharge it. And she's like, what does that mean?
Right.
So it's like, I'm going to go through that project with her. And
So that she's familiar with it.
Well, just maybe she'll get interested.
Yeah.
Like she's interested. She wants to get in a car out at El Mirage. So in May, we're going to try to put her in a car.
Oh,
She's a
that's
good driver. Yeah, just see if she's interested. Like, it'll be pretty cool if we can go to the track with the Civic and
Now you
it'll
can
go
show
12s,
her.
it'll go 11s,
Now you can show
it'll go
her.
10s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And go through that transition with her.
I feel like the RB stuff is like made a big. I feel like you're seeing a lot more of it recently. Is there like, it just feels like obviously it's very popular overseas, but I feel like lately, stateside wise, you're seeing a lot more.
I think the
A lot
timeline
more
too. I think
like a resurgence of those
they
things.
just hit that 25
Yeah,
years.
That's it.
That's a
That's
big
what
thing.
it is.
Yeah. So you have unfortunately, through the tsunami, a lot of cars were damaged,
Mhm.
water damaged. So the base number of Skylines that were produced is pretty big, but what's left?
Right.
And
And also too the number too, like that for like a R34 Skyline GTR is still very expensive.
Yeah, there are
Sure.
100
It's
plus.
not it's not like a Civic or
yeah, but that's
Something
going
like
to
that.
separate the men from the boys because
Oh, of course.
if you had to choose between a Porsche 911, a pretty new one,
Mhm.
or a 25-year-old Japanese hot rod, and you buy that Japanese hot rod, you're in. Like,
Yeah.
that's your car.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely kind of a resurgence. There's some guys down there that are the PRP guys are working through an engine casting.
I was gonna say
which is
I
gonna
just
be pretty cool.
They make
I
a
just
lot
saw
of stuff.
something now that I think they just did dual valve timing.
I met those guys at SEMA.
At SEMA, yes.
Those guys are pretty trick.
Yeah, I saw that.
I talked to that guy for a few hours. His aim looks to be very precise. And I asked some questions. They had a billet water jacketed RB26 there. And I stared at it for a little while. Then I asked some questions. And they have really high level engineering there. So I think that those components that company is going to offer are going to be pretty cool. Like, for example, the RB26 doesn't have the oil drain back that JZ has. So you pump the oil up in the head, stays in the head, crankcase pressure is trying to get out of the head, oil's trapped, oil pump doesn't have oil, bearings are smoked. Boom. So back in the day, they would do external oil drains, which isn't uncommon. A lot of domestic engines also did
I remember.
external oil drains. But those guys, and you'll have to tag them in this because they earned it. The oil drain is a dedicated channel from the head to the dry sump pump, and it's all in the engine block.
Oh, that's nice.
Right, so it's just
It
like
pulls right through.
that's
right
just a
from it.
nice thing because now you don't have these external
External
lines.
lines.
And
Yeah.
whatnot. And that dual VVTi that they're doing, it's not it's a servo driven cam timing, so it's not dependent on oil pressure.
Right.
Because as oil pressure and viscosity changes and the temperature of the whole thing changes, sometimes some computers can get into a bit of trouble with the PID loops on running the cams.
Mm-hmm.
So that just takes it out of the equation. You know?
That's actually pretty tricky.
Yeah, I saw that. That's the booth that was in is actually friend of the rooms too. The guy Mark that has all the Skylines in our area.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so he's from Jersey.
I talked to him.
He's from down the street.
I used to talk to him. Apparently, back in the day, he refreshed me on some of the conversations we'd had over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's funny, like when I saw him going there, I couldn't figure out his booth at first, and then once he started setting up, I was like, oh, okay, that's what he's doing.
Yeah. No, there's a guy, Simon, in that company. He's out of Texas, and I'm gonna go see him. He really has a high level of experience with the Skyline.
Mm-hmm.
So go out there, take a ride in a car, listen to what he has to say, share some knowledge back and forth. Like, I'm going to try to do that in December.
Okay.
So that'll be pretty cool.
So I know drag racing was a big part of, your career. How long have you been out of the seat?
Well, I don't want to say it because Victor said he's going to let me drive his pro mod, and I don't want to spook him. Man, it's been a while since I've been anything fast.
The last time that I remember actually talking to you when you were driving was like a few World Cups ago.
I was going to say, I remember you were
in a white Supra.
Yeah, well, there was one year that we were prepping to go to Texas, and Gio was having, I think it was like a potassium deficiency where he couldn't move his hands.
Oh, wow.
And we had to test the car to go to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So I got in that thing, and I just remembered it was everything I hated about that car all at once. Because I'd ran that car when we first built it, and I was familiar with it. But then just to hop in it and go a 6, the seat's too high, so your head's in the roll bar, and the 4-link had some things going on that I wasn't real happy with. It was kind of the end of that car for us, because while that car had served us extremely well, it was a bit of a dated piece. But the head, I kind of have a pet peeve. Like, I understand I could easily die in a car, but when you get in a car and you get strapped in and you're not clear of the roll bar with your helmet, I kind of feel like that's the time you get out of the car, because that's ignoring a solid red flag. And I see these guys that have these bars that go across the sides of their helmets. It's just like,
yeah, it gets to a point now with a lot of those cars, even like that car. That car, I feel like, was a constant progression over the years and to what it eventually became. And that's what I tell guys sometimes when they like go build, or they'll try to buy a car that has a cage in it already. I'm like, dude, you're like 6'2", like 220, 240. You're a big dude. You go sit in this thing and you're like all scrunched down. I'm like, that's not, I was like, think about it when you're sitting here right now, but think about what's going to happen if you hit something. Yeah. And you're going to get rattled, and it's not going to be good. And it's usually, that's kind of where you get those funky injuries and stuff like that when there is a wreck,
The car that I have now, the Supra that I have now, the cage is super laid out. It's really easy to get in and out of the car. And when you're down in the car, it's got a drop floor.
Oh, nice.
And
you sit nice and low.
Race tech seat. I mean, you could probably throw yourself off a mountain and just wake up with a headache.
Well, when it was built around.
Yeah, it was built. It was built. When that project was started, it was a safety minded thing.
Okay.
Because when you're young, you'll kind of get in anything.
Yeah.
You hop on a motorcycle, do some dumb stuff. But if once you have kids, it's like, man, like the dumbest thing I do now is
everything starts to hurt a little more when you get older.
You don't want to get your eggs scrambled.
No, that's for sure.
Like, if you're gonna get in a car accident, you hope that if it's bad, you get killed, because if not, someone has to take care of you for a long time.
Yeah.
And the initial
burden
is one thing, but that can go on for years. So just I try to mitigate. Like, I say have to, but I still have to ride a motorcycle every once in a while. Just can't let it go, so that's a problem. And then the Streamliner is pretty dangerous. But I tell you, after I've made about 10 runs in that car, it feels way less dangerous than the first time.
Everything's starting to slow down.
Yeah, slow down. Yeah.
This Supra project that you guys have, that you built, this one that you're talking about, what was the purpose for that car? What were you guys, was it to race a certain class, or
it was or
just parts development car?
It was just to have a car to be out there.
Yeah.
But when the EPA stuff started to heat up, those guys really started to look at cars like they were just mounds of HIV swarming.
Because that car never really ran, right?
No,
I was going to
it's
say.
it's never had an engine in it.
Oh, okay.
There's a mock-up block in it.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I have a block done. I have head done. I have a T56 dog box.
Okay.
I have a bell housing. I need to convert the car from auto to manual.
Okay.
And I'm just going to go race in stick shift. Because the community of people that are in stick shift are guys I'd like to race with. Like, years ago, I was at a race in Oklahoma, and my buddy Eric LaFerrier was there. He's the one that campaigns the white rice car.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Hey, man, like, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, this is what I'm doing." He said, "Well, sounds like there's some money over there." I said, "Well, come on over here and play." And now he's racing that car. And I don't want to race that guy. I mean, that guy is a hardcore, highly experienced racer.
Yeah.
Those guys know how to win too, and they know how to race. So.
Yeah. So
and Delgado, all those guys.
yeah, like I want to get into a ring that anybody's got a shot. Like when Miles goes to the finals, you're like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? And I think the stick shift has that. And there's good diversity amongst the cars, and it's anybody's game.
It really is.
When you watch Joel's car, I watched Joel's car in Maryland. It wasn't a pretty run, but it was badass. I mean, the front wheels are off the ground. There's clutch dust pouring out of it. I mean, that's a ride.
I always make it a point to watch his runs.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be something
No,
exciting.
I want to do something like that.
Him, I like the grub worm car. Like I think that car was
grub
awesome.
worm.
That thing
know,
when
yeah.
it gets on and like midway through second gear, that thing's all starting to separate.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but the grubworm car, like the engine in the grubworm car.
Yeah,
It's old school stuff. It has
but it works. He's
it has
making
no
it work.
business being out there, but it's doing it.
Yeah,
you
he's
know?
making it work. No,
Yeah,
there's
so that's
definitely been
my
a lot of good battles in that class, and it's honestly it's one of those where it's not an overly teched class. Like it's very simple rules wise.
H
like
pattern.
that's it. I think the only thing that they said this year was like there's like no big block combinations. Was basically it.
No, I
But
think that's
it's
where the fun's at.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty cool to see the amount of interest
Diversity,
that's been in that,
in that
class
class.
over the last couple of years. It's definitely grown a lot.
I want to. So Craig Liberty is talking about making a couple different top cases for the equalizer,
Okay.
and one of the options will be an H pattern. So technically, it's just an H pattern transmission,
Right.
but that transmission has dual counter shafts. So it's a counter shaft on each side of the main shaft. So there's an incredible amount of stability, and it doesn't break like a regular non-purpose built. If you have a modified gearbox like what you're racing with, or what I have in one of my cars,
Like one of the Tremix.
you could spend $20,000 a year in transmission repair.
Yeah.
Versus you buy an equalizer, you buy it once. If you operate it correctly, they live a long time, especially at the power level we're talking about. So I'm hoping that that transmission comes together, because then I'll just take that T56 dog box and put it in my Mustang, because that's a better suited application for it. And then
And then you
go
also
down
probably
that
have
road.
an infinite amount of gear ratios available for
Well,
those things.
And that's another thing that I think gets lost in the sauce is if you looked at the Titan Copper car, it had a air shifted Liberty and a clutch.
Mm-hmm.
The engine lived extremely well for how fast the car was going. The car was going mid sixes, and it was living well. And when you look at the gear splits, that's a big part of it. So when you look at a car that goes 1, 2, 3 lockup, and that engine is met with that stress at low engine speed, the engines tear up.
Yeah, it's just keeping it at a peak torque.
Yeah. So, if you can get into more forward ratios, the engine life increases, and then you spend less money.
That seems to be the combo, because I know even like the Carl Burnett car, that thing's I think like 7 or a 10 speed now. I think it was 7 at first. Yeah, I think it's up to 10 now. I know a lot of the some of these big radial pro mods and some of the big pro mods are going to the Liberty, higher gear ratios, 5, 6 speeds, like running them through like some kind of converter drive or something.
Yep.
So,
And that is the writing has kind of been on the wall because I would argue the hardest combination to make live is nitrous. Lots of nitrous. Well, the guys that were running lots of nitrous, converter drive 5-speed, and you can tighten up the engine window. Like if you talk to a guy in Pro Stock, he'll tell you that the engine won't live outside of this window.
Yeah.
Because if you pull the engine down too much, it breaks. So, you know, when you have a JZ and you shift it at 9 or something, because they don't really, it's not like a Honda. They don't have the cylinder head flow to really rev up. So you shift it at 9 or something, and it meets 6,000 or 6,200 RPM. It's miserable.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, you'd be, at least with a converter, if the converter is loose enough that you can keep the engine speed around 8,000 on the gear changes, and then hit it with the lockup at the right time that it doesn't pull down much further than that, that's a pretty good combination also.
They say that the lockup stuff definitely puts a beating on crankshafts and stuff like that if it's not, I guess, executed properly.
Well, if you could, there have been some situations where people lock them too soon and just empty everything into the oil pan. It's amazing because the engine stress has nowhere to run, right? So you could screw some stuff up, and there's also lockups that go to 0 slip, and there's lockups that go down to like 2% slip.
Yeah.
So you can kind of pick your poison on just how much you want to hold the engine down.
Yeah.
But a stick shift guy is already there.
Yeah, yeah.
Stick shift guy with a non-lockup clutch, your engine doesn't run from the gear ratios.
No,
There's traction. You put it in the next gear. That's where you're at.
Yeah, that's it. It's gonna stick there.
Yeah. So that's hard. That's rough stuff.
Yeah.
So now, recently, you kind of changed over to the land speed stuff, where you have more interest in it.
It's not that I have more interest in it.
What got you? Well, what got you? What I'm leading to is what got you into land speed.
Well, I always had an interest in it because of when you're a kid and you get in a car, the first thing you want to do is floor it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what if you could floor it for a mile? Or what if you could floor it for 2 miles? Or what if you could floor it for 4 miles? Or what if you could floor it for 5 miles? Like it's a different vibe.
Right.
So when you have a car out there that you are, say, entering the 3 and you do a mile at 300 miles an hour, the headspace is really cool because you're just covering tremendous, the sensation of speed.
Mm-hmm.
And if the thing's running, you just keep it floored. Whereas when you mess around at a drag strip, there's a start finish.
Start and stop, yeah.
And the faster you go, the less time you're racing. So if you think about the things that you love to do, doing them for more time in the same session seems to be a pretty good idea.
Right.
So the land speed thing is pretty cool like that. And then there's just a cache of incredible people. Like the people that I am hooked up with out there, it's like the White Goose Bar. They have this gooseneck trailer that there's a bar in the front, and they call it the White Goose Bar.
Okay.
But the men that are in that group of people they're just incredible dudes. I mean, you could have conversation with a guy that worked on the SR-71, or Greg was a LA fire captain, and they would go to these venues back in the 80s and do fire inspections while premium rock bands were performing. So they just basically used their fireman pass to go see shows in LA.
Right.
It's just a wicked group of people. You just have a lot of fun.
And so with that type of racing, are those purpose built cars like as an entry level? Like if I want to get into that entry level wise, can you just go out there with your stock Corvette or anything like that?
So there's an event held by USAFRA, which is like the Utah Salt Racing Association.
Okay.
And there's a 135 mile an hour class that you can take anything and go out there.
Okay.
Past that, you need safety. So
and what's the distance to do the 135?
Oh, it's a 5 mile run.
Oh wow.
So you could go up to speed, but 135 isn't very fast.
Right.
Unless you're on like a little motor, there's some 100cc stuff that's pretty interesting
out
there. Supercharged 100cc engines. But for the most part, you need roll cage. You need safety gear, because there's nothing to hit out there. But in the event that the car leaves its tires, you're going to be crashing for a while.
Yeah.
Like the spins are pretty comical. Like where we pit is at the 3 mile mark, and most cars, if they're going to spin, they spin 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll just look out there and there'll be a car spinning and it just spins forever. Like
there's nothing to stop
there's
it.
nothing to stop it. You're
watching
just
the top.
spinning. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what? Are you involved with the Speed Demon team now, or?
Yeah, I got to tinker with that this year. That was really cool.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I remember seeing something about that.
That car is, you got to kind of embrace the fact that the majority of my life for the last couple decades has been little engines with turbochargers. So then I got out there and there's this, I think it's 256-inch exotic cylinder head, small block Chevy. They'll, the guy that did the valve train is like the guy that does the valve train. So it's like, turn it 11,000, no big deal. So we turned it like 9 or 9,500, and it was pretty cool. But then as the week progressed, we ended up with this 440-inch LS-based engine.
Okay.
And you have, the way that vehicle accelerates compared to the 2JZ vehicle, like if there were an opportunity to drag race the Speed Demon versus the Valley Fever liner with the 2J, I mean, I would get mopped up because that Speed Demon rips.
Yeah.
It is so powerful.
They've had a couple different combinations in that thing over the years,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I know every year it seems like they're going after a different, I guess, record in a different class every year.
Well, it's engine displacement.
Mm-hmm.
So you move up and down, and like for example, the 2JZ, there's 2 available that you can say, I'll stay 183 inches and smaller, or I'll go, put a 90 millimeter crank in it and have that 3.2 liter, and then I'll go in a bigger class. But you could have the same engine in a couple classes.
Okay.
And there's some engines out there with, say an engine that had a 3.5-inch stroke crankshaft, and now it's got a 2.4-inch stroke crankshaft to get the displacement down enough to come down into another class.
I got you.
So it's gas is C16, fuel is anything you want.
Okay.
So you could run nitromethane, you can run methanol, you can run whatever you want in fuel, but gas is C16. So you can also have a vehicle that runs on gas. Like I was in El Mirage over the weekend, and I set a gas class record.
Okay.
In this little 2JZ powered Datsun, and the car had gone 199 and change backwards through the lights, and that's what held the record before. It was the same car, different driver, and it's just the El Mirage is a totally different vibe because it's dirt, so it's very loose and like you're like 800 feet from the finish line, and you're just looking at it, and it's a big mess. And say it's 100 feet wide, and you just kind of like fingertip the steering wheel and keep it forward and see what happens.
What kind of tires are they running? Specialties?
So they're either, well, you can't run a lot of tread because the centrifugal force will pull the tire apart.
Oh, wow.
So at Bonneville, it's like a slick looking tire, and El Mirage, they have like a little treaded pattern, but nothing that, if you were a dirt racer, you would have a paddle tire. You'd have a knobby tire. You're not allowed that. Because when you get out there at El Mirage and the lake bed is in decent shape, there's a thin crust that's pretty hard. And then underneath that is just dust, like really, really fine dirt.
Okay.
So, they don't want to get out there with paddles and really tear the lake.
Tear it up.
Try to preserve it as much as you can.
So is that tire, though, is it like a Mickey Thompson or a Goodyear or something like
Dunlop, Mickey Thompson, Goodyear.
that? Okay.
Yeah,
So they're specifically for land speed racing.
Yes, and there's like there's some cars. There's these guys down in New Zealand that are trying to go 550, and one of the biggest obstacles is tires, because you have to be able to. One of the biggest problems, you have fire, and you have tire loss. So those are your 2 probably big obstacles in that land speed arena, because you, if you have a fire, you don't necessarily want to. You gotta try to get the fire under control before you open the parachutes, because if it burns the parachutes off, now you've got no way to stop the vehicle.
Right.
because most of the vehicles don't have brakes.
Wow.
So there's that, and then there's the
Do
tire thing.
Do they mandate fire suppression on those?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole thing for that.
I wouldn't call it a fire. I mean, I guess it was a little fire. There were these little heat blankets
Okay.
on the up pipes on the streamliner, and they actually caught fire, which is pretty disappointing because
that's what they're made for.
that's what they're made for. But when they were burning, they burned the lambda sensors off the car.
Yeah,
So
it catches
ends up
something
costing
else.
a couple $1,000, which
Right.
you could easily make the argument that that expensive shrouding that you see,
Like the Formula One heat shields that they look
if
like.
that's $4,000 or $5,000. Well, I could have bought that stuff, spent a few grand more, but not had a
Yeah.
not had a fire.
Yeah. Damage a bunch
the
of
car.
electronics.
Right.
Well, yeah, because
and
if a fire starts to propagate,
Yeah.
you got a problem on your hands.
Yeah.
Especially with the amount of there's some level of air moving through the body, even though it's pretty
Fairly
sealed up.
Yeah.
So you start feeding high speed air to a fire.
It's like
You could really
that's
get
more
yourself-
fuel.
Yeah, the Demon. One of the things this year with getting involved with the Demon, it was kind of like all on a handshake. But I said like, hey, if we make it through Speed Week without having a fire, I want to have that poster that's on your wall of the shop. That was the payment. It was a poster, and we made it through Speed Week without having a fire. So I got my poster out of it.
Yeah, because the guy that used to drive that ended up passing away a couple years ago, right? Or last
this
year.
year.
Was it? I was going to say,
But
I
he
don't
was
follow it a lot, but I do remember.
I tell you though, that dude. Quick story about that dude. The team of men that work on that car are all pretty extraordinary, and one of the men was building a '67 Nova.
Okay.
So George Petit, the guy that owns the Demon, who's now passed on, he knew that the man was building a '67 Nova, so he went out and bought a '67 Nova, brought it to the Roadster shop, said, "Hey, make me a chassis."
Okay.
Brought the chassis home, and then gave it to the man as a gift.
Oh,
So
wow.
he'd have it for his project car. I mean, George was just like, when I met George, I said, how did you get here? And he said, well, I was very poor. I started working. One thing led to another. Now I'm old and rich, and I'm going to spend this money on cars. And he was so cool like that because he
That's
just,
awesome.
a lot of those guys that are high line car builders, if George believed in the man's character, he would say, hey, build me a car, like an open checkbook project.
Right.
And then that man could showcase his work to gain other customers.
Other clients and stuff like that.
And, that's kind of
That's like that concourse like mentality. Like those guys that build those concourse cars for like Amelia Island and all those, crazy shows out in Cali.
yeah.
That's how those are.
Yeah, just
You meet the right customer
get
that
the right customer, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that the Speed Demon thing definitely is one of those that gets a ton of media around that car. Usually, it's every year when that thing goes out, like everyone's watching because it's like that thing's
It's the
broken
baddest
so many.
one.
Yeah, it's broken so many records.
It accelerates so well. Like
What type of G-force does that thing see?
I don't think it's impressive.
No, just
what we're used to.
Uh-huh.
It's just watching, like if I sent you a data log and you're just watching the speed curve and you're watching that even over 400 miles an hour, you're still adding power.
oh wow, that's crazy.
It's like, because you can try to race it and play catch up with the tires, but then you're going to be putting a set of tires on it every pass.
Okay.
Tires are expensive.
Yeah.
So you just, even on the engine before it makes any boost,
Mhm.
they're powerful engines, so
Yeah.
they're already accelerating pretty well. But you got, 83, 88, 94 millimeter precision turbos on that thing. Like
Mhm.
it runs good. And it's got Shane T did the majority of the setup. So I just go in there and I'm just filling his shoes.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I
they
remember
did,
he was involved with that thing for a
yeah,
couple
for a
years
long
too.
time.
Yeah.
But they have 220 injectors and then
Okay.
mechanical. So
Oh wow.
once the thing goes up in a mechanical, the electric injectors are kind of like just handling fuel trim, which is pretty cool because when you get into like drag racing where you have those really large injectors that
Yeah.
are like bolt together, a lot of people experience problems with them.
Yeah, because they're
So-
trying to make them do things they probably weren't really designed to at that point.
Right, but what if we just relied on some mechanical injection
Yeah.
to use the electric to be precise, use the mechanical to do the gross needs of the engine.
Yeah.
Because when you're using
To get
you know,
the volume
methanol, there's a
there.
lot of fuel volume that most electronic nozzles. You know, if you meet someone that's running an 800-pound injector, they'll tell you they've had a problem at some point. There's
Yeah.
nobody that once you go past like an ID 2600 or that Siemens Deca 2200,
Yeah, that a lot of guys run.
you get into those larger nozzles.
Yep.
You know that they're pretty.
It's
sensitive.
funny you say that because a lot of guys that I know that end up switching to try to run a set of those to, you know, as a set of secondaries, almost always end up switching back because they're like, oh, these things didn't work right, or above a certain RPM, they start doing something goofy, or, you know, I know there's a lot of different companies now that offer those type of injectors, but it seems like everyone at some point or another has had those and had issues with them and then pulled them back off.
Yeah, no, you could, you know, like the injector dynamic stuff for all these years, you knew what you're getting.
Yes.
From the day you put them in to, you know, the fifth or sixth race, the trim was consistent.
Yeah.
You know, like you get into some big injectors where you'll run the injector for a period of time and then your fuel trim changes a lot because the injector flow changes a lot. Those are some problems that you don't want to deal with.
I've actually seen a lot of weird injector issues with, like, we bought a flow bench for our shop.
Yeah.
And then, you know, as you start running different brands of stuff through there, you kind of start to see like little patterns on ones that you don't see on others.
Right.
Even like how some won't even work with, like, our machine won't even run certain injectors. It just can't do it. And it's like you start trying to mess with the pulse width and the pressure, and then you could get them to start to work and you could kind of see, all right, well, this is why this injector is hard to tune, because when you start getting to those real low operating ranges, it just doesn't work well.
Yeah.
And, you know, guys are like, oh, but, you know, they told me it's the same as this injector. It's like, no, it's not.
No,
it's not.
You know, it's cool though, because the industry's been running long enough that there are some brands that you know what you're going to get.
Yes. ID's definitely one of them.
Yeah,
You know, that's what I've always ran.
If you stay inside of the core brands, you know, and you don't believe the hype and you don't buy into the new latest greatest BS, there's some brands you can really rely on in our space, which is pretty exciting because they've been good brands but the common denominator is the people behind them. Like, there's some really good guys behind a lot of these good brands.
Yeah, and it's guys that are focused on, you know, delivering results and a good product, and not just, hey, you know, this is the new latest and greatest gizmo, or you know, these are cheaper than the next guys, but, you know, ultimately they're junk. You know.
No, I'm with you there.
So now that you started RS Garage, I've noticed that you're producing more content and it's coming out more steadily. So it's almost to say that your new role is also a content creator.
It hurts my head to think that. It genuinely does, because how I perceive myself is very different than how others perceive me. And to me, I'm just a guy that's into cars.
Yeah.
And I've hung out with some content creators, and I have a hard time because I grew up in a world that if I wasn't working with my hands, I wasn't making no money.
Right.
So I realized I can't play that game anymore because I'm too old to play it. I'll just work until my hands are broken up. So I got to like change my role a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I just, you know, even on this last couple weeks, the work that I was doing and stuff, like the car that I tuned in Vegas, I don't think I took a picture of it.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I mean, it was a white Evo, full Motec dash, keypad, sequential gearbox. I mean, we took it out for a rip on the street. It was fast, and I didn't even take a picture of it. You know, and I'm just like,
is it Evo 8 or Evo 10?
An Evo 8.
Nice.
Sorry, I don't.
No,
Evo
I'm just,
8.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Those 10s aren't Evos.
Well, they're Evos, but they're Evos because
Just has a badge.
kind of yeah. The Evo to me, it's kind of like the Super to me, the
Right.
Evo to me. But yeah, there's a lot of the thing that I'm struggling with right now is I gotta kind of get off the pot and either get another building or not get another building. But I honestly miss not having a dyno. That's a kind of a sticking point for me right now. And it's not that I want the dyno for content. I want the dyno because I really liked having access to a dyno all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
It's a tool.
well, it's a place to go play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if I could, you know, I could use the dyno. It just makes it, it's just a toy to go play with. On a Saturday, I could go use the dyno,
Right.
and mess with something or learn something or find, like, I remember I would go, the dyno cell at Real Street's really nice, and it has really good airflow. So the engine's always eating clean air. Like, I would catch a little bit of slack on how do you make so much power with that turbo? It's like, well, where are you dynoing? And it's like they're dynoing in this room with no air.
Small room. And
The other day, I was dynoing in a car in Virginia, and like I smell the exhaust gas. The wastegate is opening. You know, it's a dual gate header. You got one wastegate opening in front of the air cleaner. There's no airflow under the car.
Right.
I've seen
Thing's
that
just
before.
eating exhaust gas.
Yeah, which is
You
no
know,
good.
so it's gonna kill.
Or
power.
as you start doing more and more pulls, the power starts to get a little more erratic, and it
Yeah,
just
you gotta like let the
start
room
to kind
clean
of
out.
drop down a little bit. Yeah, we see that.
Yeah.
would
but-
you consider like just getting an engine dyno, or you
No.
want like a chassis dyno?
No, the engine dynos are cool.
A lot of setup time for those things.
But there's a lot of setup time for it. You have this other package of numbers that aligning those numbers with what people are commonly used to is another kind of an obstacle.
Right.
Like a dyno jet, you could love or hate a dyno jet, but a dyno jet gives up what it gives
it's
up.
like the industry standard.
If you
number.
have some dudes that are running a hair dryer on the stack to move the numbers, well,
Right.
there's always that risk, right?
I know what you mean.
But when you get into all these other dynos, you know, it's kind of print your own numbers. And I think that's rough because the outside perception, the consumer is looking to someone for data. And if that someone isn't honest with their data, then the consumer doesn't end up getting what they thought they were going to get.
Right, to get cheated.
They get cheated, right? And that, at least with a dyno jet, you don't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Because a dyno jet's just a dyno jet.
Just tells you what it
I
is.
feel like nowadays you're starting to see, you know, with the popularity of the mainline, like the hub dynos,
Yeah.
you see a lot of guys where it's like, oh man, this car made 1,500. I'm like, yeah, but like that thing on a dyno jet with a tire on it, which is going to lose some power. And now you strap it down and frictional losses. You start factoring all that stuff up. It's like that might make 1,200, 1,300.
Yeah,
But
there's definitely a difference.
When you start going from dyno jet to dyno jet, it's probably going to be similar where it's like you're comparing the mainline, you know, which they say those things are pretty accurate. And I know the way they load and stuff like that, I'm sure contributes to those power numbers. But it's like when you, like you said, you kind of go from the dyno jet has always kind of been the industry standard,
Yeah.
you know, and you start seeing that and you could compare a number from dyno to dyno, you know, but it's like you said, you do get guys out there who are like, oh yeah, this thing made X amount of power. And you're like, well, were you there for that? And they were like, well, no, that's what they told me. It's like, yeah, chances are probably didn't make it.
Yeah, no, we did, Victor and I, we did a thing a few years back where we just dynoed the same car,
Mm-hmm.
dyno jet, you know, 100 miles away or whatever. And it was the same number. And it was cool because I knew that if Alpha was producing this and I was producing that, we were in the same,
Yeah.
we were playing on the same playground.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things I really do like about a mainline dyno. I like the fact that you don't have to clog up half your shop with it.
Yeah.
I like not having the tire liability. You know, one of the worst things about when I used to dyno my Supra a lot is I'd kill tires on it. When you try to do 3 runs, make a run, idle, make a run, idle, make a run. Because you want to average those numbers and see what the vehicle actually produces for power.
Right.
You could kill a set of tires. I mean, I killed a lot of tires like that. And
It's dangerous.
Well,
too.
plus if the tire comes apart and wads up the quarter on your car, now
Yeah.
you've got a different problem.
We've had it happen a couple times at our dyno, and it's like it's not good. Usually, like I had it happen on my personal car, I had it happen on a customer's car like once or twice.
Yeah.
And it's one of those where you're like, oh, we'll just do one more pull to see like a final number, and it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh, there goes the fender, there goes a headlight.
It takes
It's-
so long for
it
the roller to
literally-
stop.
And it's never like it just rips the tire off and the tread went flying. It's like it ripped the tire off all the
took
treads
everything
all
else
the
with
way,
it.
and it just stayed attached that one little bit. So you got this big just pendulum swinging
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely destruction. The other thing too with that's nice about the main lines, like let's say you're tuning a 1,500 horsepower Supra and you're by yourself and the thing starts to spin the tire, you don't have 2 or 3 guys to sit in the trunk. So now it's like, oh, you don't have to worry about that. Which
No,
they're
that's
nice. They're definitely nice for that reason. I feel like now with the popularity of them, you're probably gonna, now there's more stuff to compare to. But it's like you could attest from probably years ago when you'd get like the one guy's like, hey, I dynoed, I made 1,500 on a Mustang dyno. You're like, well, it's like it's not really hard to. It's kind of hard to compare.
No, there were these guys in Orlando back in the day, and they didn't understand that if you were thinking about it, none of the cars they had dyno sheets for had enough fuel pump to even do what they were doing. Because they just had Mustang dynos, and you could make it read whatever you want.
We used to fight that battle a lot. One of the guys that's not far from here, he doesn't really tune anymore, but he used to dyno on a dyno pack a lot. That was his thing.
Yeah.
So we'd get guys that'd be like, "Hey, I got this, NA Honda setup that made 300 horsepower." We're like, "Really?" It's like because that thing normally only makes like 275.
Yeah.
Or the numbers were always way exaggerated. So then it would get to a point where a lot of customers would go to him because like, "Oh man, this guy makes big power with everything." Right. But then you get to the track and it's like our cars were outrunning them all the time. Well, and you would see that.
That's the responsibility and the integrity of the people.
Yeah.
And that one's rough because like I was able to make some pretty big power numbers on the dyno jet. Mm-hmm. And like for example, if you have a Mark IV Supra and you dyno it in fourth and then you put it in fifth and you dyno it in fifth, it picks up 35, 40 horsepower. Yeah. Because it's loading that thing down.
Yeah, we see that.
But if you don't know that, you may always be chasing that.
Yeah.
So there's some tricks, but having clean air,
yeah, that's big.
Having good traction, on and on and on. But the mainline dyno, the thing I don't like about it is you're feeding the power into a retarder, so you're muffling kind of the signature of the engine. So when you have a really good running engine that all the cylinders are contributing equally, and you have the sampling on 0 on your dyno jet, you paint a nice graph, like you have a good engine.
Yeah.
But when you are feeding the power into a retarder where it's soaking up those differences in pulses, and then when you get the final result on the graph, it just looks all pretty. Like I did a Mustang a while back on a mainline, and it had a miss. Like I felt it had a miss, but the dyno graph
you couldn't see
the
it.
Miss.
Yeah.
And a miss is pronounced. But when you have a car that's borderline on ignition, you won't see it. Whereas on a dyno jet, you'll see it. But the dyno jet thing, I think they really hurt themselves a lot. I think that in 20 years they'll have to look back and understand they cost themselves a lot of money with WinPep 8.
Yeah, that's
that
always
like, that single thing was like because whenever I got WinPep 8, I was pretty turned off to the machine.
Yeah,
because it's just like this.
They even didn't they get rid of the standard correction at one point, and then they brought it back, and they had a couple different things that they changed. It was just a
bunch that became pretty unattractive.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those changes that probably changed for the worse that a lot of guys didn't.
Yeah, but
weren't fans of it.
The software guys once they double down in their position, it's like you're better off just walking away because you're not going to convince. You're not going to convince anybody.
Change it back.
No, it was bad, and it was one of those things where it's like everyone kind of got sold on it's the latest and greatest, and then people start switching, and they're like, "Hold on a second, like no, this is horrible,
terrible."
Yeah,
it was worse because
so bad.
Your WinPep 7 stack broke, and they wouldn't fix it. Yeah. So that
it is. It is tough when you get into those things. Those situations.
I don't know that I would buy a mainline or wouldn't buy a mainline. Job has a dyno jet, so he's just a couple hours away, so I have to work through that if I'm going to use his place. But he's got a really nice cell and whatnot.
Like he doesn't have a shop, right? He's just kind of like does his own thing.
He does his own thing.
Okay.
Yeah, he's just diehard. He loves this stuff.
Yeah. I've known him for a couple years back, and I know you were kind of involved with Brett's car, and I know I know he does a lot of the tuning on that. So
yeah, that was another
things.
Not that I would have been able to accomplish what Job accomplished because I think that Job is I think he's the best guy in the whole industry when it comes to drag racing a vehicle. The dude's just out of this world. But when the EPA stuff happened, that was another thing. It's like, stop tuning cars. And it was
Yeah.
like, holy crap.
Yeah, it's definitely
you're
a
not gonna do
slippery
nothing about it.
slope.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a
'cause-
slippery slope with that.
Yeah. For
You gotta
sure.
you gotta tune cars now. With like, you gotta be anonymous.
Yeah,
You
you
gotta
know,
wear a mask.
I got the what I do is I have a
can't
OJ
post videos
Simpson
of it.
mask.
Yeah,
That's what
you
I
need
wear.
to. You need to.
So,
Be fun.
But back to the I don't mean to cut you off, but back to the content creating part.
Yeah.
How do you, like you said, that's never really been your thing. Like you said, you just spent a whole week with this car, amazing, and you didn't take any pictures with it or of it and stuff like that. How are you like reminding yourself like, hey, I need to take a step back and kind of document what I'm doing, because that is pretty integral part of your business now.
So I have to, well, first and foremost, the stress of not earning money is a really good reminder of what I need to do.
Yeah.
So there's that. The second thing is, and this is kind of more of a personal problem that I have, is wrapping my head around the perception of someone else is interested in what I'm doing. I get it, man. Like I've met people and I see them light up, and I walk away from the conversation, and it's like every time that happens, I walk away like, huh, that was enjoyable. But I don't really zoom out and realize there's a lot of people that think that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that if I can continue to kind of serve in that manner of like teaching and sharing information, then I will be rewarded on the other side.
Right.
But now in the current role with RS Garage, I have to do that because I have to get the sales leads. Like, so for all these years that I was at Real Street, I was generating sales leads, and that would translate into income into the business, and then the partners would share the money, and all was good. And I have to kind of like realize that I have to keep doing that, but there's a different urgency now because the group of people that I'm with now,
They're also relying on you.
they're also, yeah. So Luis is really good. When I had to make a decision to go back into business, because I looked around at some job opportunities, and a couple of them required moving, and I didn't want to go to work for a direct competitor. I still think that would be below the standard that I would set for myself, because again, Real Street did move the needle in my life a lot. But I just said, well, I'll go back into business if I can have these guys. So, Luis was like number one, because him and I have worked and traveled together, and he gets me, and we have a good time together, and he's incredible with his work. And then my older daughter, when she came back from school, and she was like, hey, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, at a minimum, you could spend a couple years with me. I'll take care of your bills. You'll get to know me, because I'm going to die probably before your sister is your age, because of just the way that shit happens. So you're going to have a real good account of who I am, because I don't have to filter myself at all around her.
Right.
And if Natalie ever has questions, you can answer them.
You can share stories
So
of
that
that.
was a really cool thing. And then when Mo called and said, hey, man, I'm ready, I'm like, okay. And then there's another young dude, Julio went through the longest session of like wax on, wax off, like learning the lessons at Real Street. Like he worked for me on my Mustang a lot, and he's a really good technician.
Okay.
He really, like when you open the hood on somebody's car, it says a lot about them.
Yeah, you could usually tell.
And when you look at he opens the hood on his car, you're looking at it, you're like, man, this guy really cares about what he's doing. So I can give him things to do. He's quiet. He's happy to do them. He's
and
got
he'll
a
get the job
killer
done.
heart. Well, it's not a race.
Right.
If we're working on something, get it done right is way better than get it done fast.
Yeah. You're not you're not at that
having
point
comebacks,
anymore.
There's no air tools. We're just working on stuff.
Right.
So right now I have a pretty good team. The main thing that I am lacking and need, and it's all kind of like in perfect timing, because I have to remind myself it hasn't been that long. I'm less than a year out.
Right.
So it's okay if it takes another year or two, but at the same time, I don't want to be 50 and making money again. I'd like to start making money again. That way I can make a run at retirement. My original plan was to work my way out of Real Street at 50, But one of the guys was like, with what we think will be worth then, we won't want to pay you then. We want to pay you now while we're
You
in
want
a
to pay
lull.
right.
You know, which
They wouldn't be able to afford to pay it out at that point.
right. So it's dumb, but whatever. But now it's just creating content to create sales leads, getting people to understand that I'm not there anymore. And buying from that company does me no good. Like I have a more than competent sales guy that has 3 languages. I've got other sales guys that are just waiting to come on. I have a good reputation throughout the industry that the quality brands that I want to do business with, you know, that they want to do business with me. So all the setting up of the accounts and all that stuff is pretty simple. So now it's just generate content, create sales leads, translate those into income, get the stress back off, you know, and it's not like it was when I was a kid. When I was a kid and I started Real Street, I was super on my heels. And now I'm not on my heels because guys my age get heart attacks and cancer and they die. And like me, I just got a little like, I was on a ride, I hit a pretty big speed bump. It's okay. I just gotta start making money again, doing what I love.
And I think also too, not a lot of people get the opportunity like you would have because you know, for your baby to have that business for so long, and all of a sudden, like you said, you hit that bump, and now
It's
it just
all
comes
you
to a
knew
stop.
for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then but also you're getting a second chance, and it's kind of like you learn from your mistakes.
Yep.
From all those years of experience.
Yep.
You definitely learned
Oh, I tell
a
you
ton of knowledge that you don't know
Yeah.
when you started to now. So I think that's also a plus. And like you said, you're working with brands that you have almost 20 years of relationships with, come back in, and now it's like, all right, like this is my new thing. And I'm sure everybody's just like, all right, let's do it. Like, let's make it happen,
it's pretty good. I could argue that the Real Street thing had to come to an end because the 4 men had been together so long, and inside of a couple of those relationships were some things that were never going to change. And whether the man was right or whether the man was wrong, there were these big rifts that they weren't going to go away. And if you go back to like the base failure in the relationships, they all happened 2007, 2008, 2009, the base failure.
right.
But it was like we were raising this child, so we hung on to it, you know, kind of like, and it's funny, like that Gold Digger song where it's like the kid turns 18, he finds out it wasn't his. Man, I was ringing that song in my head last year when this was all coming to a close because I'm like, man, it's on one hand, it's an 18-year block. I feel attached to this company. And on the other hand, who cares? You know, just move on, do your thing.
Yeah, you're still able. You're not,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You still, like, I don't think, you still have what's in your head. No one can ever take that from you.
And more because now I have a legitimate desire to teach because there are, we went through this wave where you were told if you don't go to, like I was told if I didn't go to college, I wouldn't amount to nothing. And I went to college for a semester. I was already making good money as a technician. Wasn't for me. And I have friends now that are plumbers and electricians and mechanics, and these guys are all doing really well for themselves. And it's important for young men that aren't inside cats, that, you know, the guys that are going to go in the dorm room and play video games for 12 hours a day or whatever, like, let them be. Let them grow up to be the future weirdos of America. But the guys that want to go out and, like, work on something, you can make a really good living for yourself, support family, get into good friend circles, have cool hobbies, all that stuff by working a trade.
Right.
So I would love the opportunity. Like, people ask me, they'll message me and say, hey, do you want to do a class? It's like, would you do a class? Would you consider coming here on a Saturday and teaching people something? I'm like, yeah, as long as they're under 25. Because I don't want to argue with some old dude about how his uncle told him how to do it. I want to get some kid that's green that I can say, like, head that way, avoid that, avoid
Somebody
that.
that doesn't have the bad habits already.
Yeah. Like just the opportunity to get younger people involved in this hobby and have them not have to suffer through learning the wrong way. I'm super interested in that. I don't even know that I would try to monetize it. I would feel a lot of just purposeful joy getting to share that. Like
Your gift to the society.
yeah, like there was this year at Bonneville, a high school field trip was at Bonneville Speed Week.
Oh,
that's
that's
cool.
And there
cool.
were kids that walked over and they were like, that's a 2JZ.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do you know about that engine? And then, one of the kids knew me from YouTube and like, we're just rapping back and forth. It's pretty wild because now there's this spread where there's guys my age, there's guys that are younger, there's guys that are older, but they've all kind of caught a glimpse of me on the internet.
Mhm.
And that's a pretty neat opportunity to try to work with moving forward.
And I think like now you just said that too about speaking, it just got me thinking as well. Like how in every industry there's always like that guy that, I mean, I guess you call them influencers, but you see them more now. But there's always someone speaking at some type of event, right? I don't think there's anybody like that in our industry that really goes to bat for being a technician or being like a tinkerer or something like that. Because like you said, for the longest, even when I was in school, yeah, college was a thing. Like if you don't go to college, you're going to be a failure. And like you said, the last generation, the guys right now, some of these college people are working at Home Depot. And meanwhile, the guy that they were laughing at, the plumbers, the electricians, the technicians, the blue collar workers, they're the ones that are, getting the job done as far as financially more stable than them.
No, that's
I think like those speaking engagements for
this
you
is a whole nother
would be like, it's a whole other
it's a whole
thing.
other conversation, but it needs
it's
to be
definitely
done.
a void in there, and I think you'd be a good candidate for that.
Yeah,
because you are a good speaker, and you're able to get that message across.
What I
positively.
think also helps with that is that, nowadays, obviously we grew up, I'm much younger, a little bit younger than you, me and Hugo, like our thing was like during the forum days.
Yeah.
And then that was a thing. And then now obviously
it's
the
videos.
forums is all video and YouTube and stuff like that, which there's a ton of information out there, but there's also a ton of bad information out there where you have a track record that backs up the information you're putting out there. So you have the notoriety, and it's like, you're not learning from just some guy that says, oh, hey, this is the way you should do it. You're learning from somebody, these guys will have the opportunity to learn from you, from somebody that's going to say, hey, this is the way you should do it, and here's why. You know?
But you have to be able to, because it's the internet, it's a very sensitive climate. Like the other day I was watching some videos and it was like how to build an engine. And the video had 1 million views.
Mm-hmm.
The man's a younger man that he is very sharp for his age.
Yeah.
And he made 10 pretty entry-level mistakes throughout the video.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now the people that watch the video that have the confidence in that young man will do the same mistakes. But if you go in the comments and you say, hey, that's wrong,
They're going to tear you up.
Oh yeah,
you're on the side of it. So like in that particular situation, the best thing I could come up with is like, give that guy a call.
Yeah, and let them know.
And ask him if he would be open to doing the video again, and or no video at all, but just teach him, show him, explain to him why those things need to be that way. Because with engine building, there's some stuff that just no go.
Mm-hmm.
You may head porting gets weird. There's flow bench guys and there's math guys, and I think the math guys will always beat the flow bench guys. There's all these opinions and brands and wallets being padded and blah blah blah, but like a lot of this stuff is just no go.
Basically.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you get into people that are just making fundamental error, like engine break-in, like that conversation, man, that's a tough one, because if you can bring someone kind of to the table through a logical path, then you can sell them on the proper way to break in an engine.
right.
But if you can't bring them to the table with a logical path, like what I would do is I would say, hey, Ricky, I'm coming up to Jersey. I need you to go find me something with 200,000 miles on it that the oil looks okay in. We're going to teach these kids about engine break-in. And we're going to brick it, and we're going to stand around and listen to this thing scream until it overheats and shuts off. Then we're going to start it up again and do it again until finally it kicks something out of it. And then we're going to try that with a brand new engine.
Yeah.
And the brand new engine is going to fail almost immediately because it's had no familiarization period.
Yeah.
And you get these guys that some of these guys are real scary. I mean, guys that'll break a lot of engines in one day and not even understand how it happened.
Yeah.
They're out there.
They'll just blame the parts, like oh, this part failed or these rods are bad. It's like, no, the rod's not bad.
When I was building engines before, those engines were staying in house, and I had control of the engine.
Yeah.
Now I'm mailing engines out, and in the past month, I have had these horrible experiences where a guy that I know is calling me and telling me about how he started his new engine that I built him, and I'm just like, oh man, it's like okay, one of the next videos we are going to produce is how to start your new engine. Now I'm going to face the guy that his cousin's uncle Joey breaks them in at the racetrack and everything's fine, and that's fine. I mean, when we go to Bonneville, like the first time the Streamliner engine was over 3,000 RPM, it went to 9,000 RPM.
Yeah.
But that engine doesn't need to do anything but put out a couple times a year.
Right.
And if it breaks, it breaks.
You're not trying to go 50,000 miles with that.
But
if it lasts the weekend, you're happy.
Sure. But when you got a guy that he has saved and researched and really done his best to put together something that he really, not only does he want it to live, he needs it to live.
Yeah.
Right.
If that thing breaks, his wife is going to be down his throat.
He spent every dime he's got.
There's
to
a
put
broken
that
car in
together.
the driveway.
Yep.
Month 2, now he's selling the thing on Facebook, not running. Like, it's horrible. It's like, well, what if at no cost to you, you could avoid failure if you just broke the engine in.
Just follow
properly.
these simple guidelines.
Simple guidelines. Yeah. So like that's a video that I'm gonna put together soon, and I'll probably face some backlash for it. But I'm okay being on both sides of it. Like the engine that's in my Supra, my regular street car Supra, makes 1,000 horsepower, uses no oil. The oil looks like it's if I poured the oil out, it's like nice tan clean oil. It's got a 115 compression height. So it's a pretty miserable piston. Yeah. The oil pin bore is got a support rail, but the engine was broken the way that I would break an engine in, and it's a happy engine.
I look forward to you putting that video out because that's a question that we get a lot, and I usually will tend to tell people like, hey, ask whoever built the engine because everyone's got their different opinions. Guys will ask us, hey, like if we built it, we'll tell them to do it a certain way. But like you said, there's times where it's like on my personal race car, if we have time, I'll put it on the dyno, run it through the gears a couple times, do a couple things that I usually do to get them run in. But if it's like, hey, we got to go racing tomorrow, we're going to put it in the car, we're going to go racing. Same thing that if it lasts a week, if it lasts 3-4 races, we're happy with it. We're going to tear it down. We're going to look at it once it comes apart and see what needs to be, how everything looks. But if you are a guy that's building a street car that you want to last, 30, 40,000 miles, you should take those added steps.
What's the downside?
There is no downside to it,
Just like those parts have never met each other before. Yeah. Give them some time.
And even just sometimes you'll get guys they're so pressed to like, oh, I just want to start it and hear it run, where they're starting a brand new engine with no water in it. Yeah. Or it's like, hey, I didn't really have the right oil or something, like I didn't prime the thing. Like there's a lot of steps, and I see that what you're saying too, where when you're building something in house and you're building it, you're installing it, you're tuning it, you're racing it, you could kind of see all aspects of it. But when you're building engines for customers and you're sending them out, now it's like, hey, how many times we've seen customers destroy a brand new engine because they didn't put the right flywheel bolts or the right crank pulley, and then the stuff backs off. Now the crank's trash. Now you're taking the whole thing apart, and they're like, "Oh man, but I didn't know that." It's like, well, like you almost like we get to a point where sometimes something to us that's second nature, to these guys, to like someone that's just getting into it, they don't know what they don't know. Where some of the videos you do put out are good in that sense, where it's like, hey, like watch this video, what this guy's telling you to do. Like you need to follow that to the T, because that is like everything there holds true, and there's a fact to all that stuff.
Well, we have to we kind of have to learn to protect each other from ourselves, because our segment is real small, and you get guys that give up. Like
Yes.
if a guy has a rough go with a shop,
Yeah.
or a rough
We
go
see
with
that
a
all the
build,
time.
you know, he leaves. He goes and finds another toy to play with, and we
Mhm.
lose him.
Yeah.
And that's a shame because like I have had guys that like they really ran themselves like
We see that a
ringer.
lot. We see that a lot where, you know, customer was dealing with somebody, got bad advice, got ripped off. Now the guy's pissed off, and like you said, he sells everything. The industry loses a customer. That's one less car guy that's involved. They go do something else, where if they would have took a step back, listened to the right people, got the correct advice, this guy, you know how it is. Once they get that shot in the arm, they're stuck. They're in that
Yeah.
industry forever.
But
Yeah.
there's no
Or in the
there's
hobby
no credibility
forever.
test.
Yeah,
No.
and
Like,
that's a big problem.
It's always like, oh, go to this guy. Like if you're listening to your friend, oh, I'm gonna go to this guy, but everyone else like, oh, that guy sucks.
Well, who are the probably one of the things that we all kind of did to ourselves is the long running guys, the guys that probably should easily command a couple $100 an hour.
Mhm.
Maybe they do or maybe they don't. And then the guys that are coming into it, maybe they don't have the skill set or the knowledge or the understanding or the ethics or the integrity to do it right, but they can stay in business long enough
Yeah.
to really screw some people up.
Right.
No, and it
You know?
it happens
But
all the
there's
time.
There's no little like you can go on.
There's no verified.
There's no verify.
There's no Angie's
right?
list for
Yeah.
it.
Right.
You know?
So and then you get into a scenario like, where does the guy go to? Like if you went and bought a new Hellcat thing,
Mm-hmm.
there's probably a lot of guys in this area that will tune that vehicle for you. A
Mhm.
lot of them.
Yep.
But there's one that was at Mopar that was in the calibrations department that fed the other men that slipped the code out through the back door to let the other tuner guys have access to it. Like, where's that guy and how much does he charge? Because you don't want to blow your engine up.
No.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, especially when you spend, like you said, some of these guys, be it the $5,000 customer or the $50,000 customer, they're giving you everything they got. And it gets to that point where, when something does go wrong, they've expended everything that they have. And now it's like, oh man, now what? Or when you get the guy that's been 2-3 different shops, like I had a kind of dealing with a guy like that right now. It's been to a couple different shops and it's like, oh man, but like, hey, listen, like I understand, but we're also here to provide a service. And, we charge a certain price for our service, but we know when you leave here, it's going to be done 100%. Oh, but, I dealt like with this shop and that shop. And now we've, they kind of have a bad taste in their mouth. So now you're kind of also trying to curate that
You
relationship.
got to listen, though,
yeah.
because those guys, the guy that's been screwed by everybody, it's like a woman. Like
A lot of
that's got
times
a
he's
bunch
the
of bad
problem.
guys, like he's the
Yeah.
problem. So I always listen. Like, how did your last engine die?
Yeah.
Can I help you with the calibration? Like, if I sell an engine to someone, I want to see their tune up.
Yeah.
I want to understand. Like, there was just
Or you want to know who's tuning it.
Yeah, but there was a guy out and he stopped me at SEMA and he said, "Hey, my engine broke, and this is how it broke." And he wants an explanation. And I already had talked to the engine builder, and I told him why it broke. I helped the man understand why the failure occurred and how to avoid the failure.
Yeah.
And then the customer's in front of me, and I'm not going to bash that guy. I don't know that guy, but I'm not going to bash that guy. So I'm like, hey, like, you're looking for an answer that you're looking for your answer. I've already given you the answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
That was-
imagine
They
not
want
what
you
he-
to agree with
yeah,
them.
like there's a dog has bitten you. There's
Yeah.
blood coming out of your leg. There's not another reason why there's blood coming out of your leg.
Yeah.
A dog
Got
bit
big
you.
by a
It's
dog.
like-
The engine only breaks that way, this way.
It's like the guy that comes to you and says, hey, I got these parts, I want to use them. And you're like, nah, that won't work because it doesn't work. You've tried it. But then he goes down to the next guy and then the next guy. And then finally the one guy that agrees with him and they use whatever he wanted to use.
Yep.
And then when it fails, it's, oh, well, that guy doesn't know shit. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, no, everyone else told you what not to do.
Yeah.
And you went with the guy that agreed with, co-signed whatever it is that you wanted to do. And now when it failed, now you're blaming that guy. But meanwhile, it's like 5 other guys told you it wasn't going to work.
Yeah,
you
but
know?
you'd again, because it's the internet, you have to be gentle.
Yeah.
with
Right.
Your delivery.
even,
on
yeah,
things.
even in person, sometimes nowadays you kind of get that.
Yeah. The way that I like doing it is like, I've said this, I don't know where the quote came from, but it's like, you got to be smart enough to know how dumb you are.
Mhm.
And if you can really sit back and listen, and just become a good witness of a situation and give it some time,
Yeah.
you'll be way more prepared to go through it. Like those guys, like I imagine that there's a bean counter in Germany trying to understand what's going on in America right now with the modern turbocharged BMW because they're seeing these upticks in parts.
Yeah.
Why are we selling
So many
all
engines.
these engines to America?
Right.
And you've got these, these ham-fisted dudes that are tearing some stuff up, and the customers, it's new money. It's a new emerging market. It's
Yeah,
like
it is.
DSMs all over again.
Right.
Yeah.
And
What's
they're just
crazy
having
is that a
party.
lot of those cars are like leased cars. So that's what's even
Well,
scarier.
yeah, because if the lawyers get a hold of you, like I've had 3M cars, and when you buy that car, it's like, hey, like, don't modify that car. Like, you signed the thing right there.
Yeah.
It's not yours to modify.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, I didn't want to modify those cars because they were just rentals to me. But
What was your favorite M?
I tell you, I had an E60 M5, which a lot of people hate on.
I like that. The V10.
But my buddy Job gave me some Dyno exhaust for it. My brothers and I, we flew up to PA and bought it. It was a 17,000-mile car.
Mm-hmm.
I could take my nieces out and go do donuts, in a parking lot. And the
It sounds
sound
good. It sounds
got 12
so good.
miles per gallon, and I didn't care one
Smiles
bit.
per gallon. Smiles per
and
gallon.
then I bought my wife a GS 350 Lexus, and she hated it because it was so quiet. So she went out on a trip, and I found a dude that was trying to get out of an F80 M3, and he wanted into a Lexus. So it was like,
Perfect.
and I really enjoyed that car. It was a DCT car. I had both a DCT and a manual, but I think the DCT was a really good match.
The
because,
CCTs, I think, were faster than the manuals.
you could feel in the torque request, the DCT had very good torque mapping,
yeah.
whereas the manual, it just didn't have the snap.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the DCT between those two, between the DCT F80 M3 and the E60 M5, the E60 M5, I'd buy that car again,
Yeah.
just for the sounds.
Was that a 6-speed or was that a
It was a
decent?
6-speed.
Yeah.
Yeah. You gotta have a six. It's white, black interior, 6-speed.
Yeah, those are
it
nice.
was a really that
Nice,
was a
nice
cool
color
car.
combo.
It was enjoyable. I took it up to a really high speed a couple times. That was a fun car. I dig that car.
It's a solid car.
Yeah.
So notice one thing too, your hat.
Yeah.
The hats are very special in the land speed racing
Mm-hmm.
scene. So the blue and it's what's the how do you distinguish the I guess like your accomplishment through the hat it's through the colors, right?
So you can get into the 200-mile-an-hour club, which has been going on for ages now. And the 200-mile-an-hour club is when you go out there and you enter in a class and you exceed a previous record or you run on an open record. So it's not just go out there and go over 200, you get a hat. You have to beat a existing record. And these aren't internet records. These are records in a book, and there's rules and stuff.
Yeah, legit records.
And then the 300-mile-an-hour club is just that, same thing. And then there's a 400-mile-an-hour club, which is a black hat.
Mm.
And then there's a dirty red hat, which is like the Dirty 2 Club, which is El Mirage because it's dirt. So that's a burgundy hat.
Okay.
And some people will argue that the burgundy hat is the hardest one to get because you really have to just like, it's like that scene in Fight Club where he lets go of the steering wheel and floors it.
Mm-hmm.
And they just drive the car off into a big crash. The dirty club is like, it's just dirt. You spin. Like I went through the traps at over 200 miles an hour with 25 mile per hour or more rear wheel speed. It's just, I mean, it's just cooking the tires.
Now,
off
do
of
they
it.
do that? Is it like over an average?
No. Okay. So the,
How do they classify
that's an awesome
that?
question. So at El Mirage, it's a 1.3 mile dirt drag race.
Okay.
You do it once. You don't have to back it up. You get from here to there. And
Whatever the
if
top speed was.
If you beat the previous record and you're over 200, you're in. And then Bonneville is like a timed mile. Enter a mile, exit a mile is the average speed throughout the mile.
Okay.
So you have to, and if you there are cars that go out to Bonneville that they'll run out of gas in the 4, so they do it in the 3. So you want a car that will accelerate well, and back in the old days, there's enough salt out there that there was like an 11-mile course.
Oh, wow.
Which really gets nutty. But they pump the salt out. It's the salt you're going to be driving on this winter around here. That's the salt. So the salt gets thinner and thinner and thinner every year.
Yeah, because up there, it's like very weather dependent too, right? There's been years where I think, was it last year that they went up there and it was like, it rained. It was like all flooded real bad.
Yeah, but the lake beds are really neat. When it rained, we were driving our trucks and trailers off of the lake bed, and there were these big 4x8 sheets of salt floating around. You just imagine the place was going to be destroyed forever. And you get a little bit of water left, and the wind blows it around, and it's just like auto levels the place again, and it's good again. But there's a thing called Save the Salt, where it's money, but the BLM is selling salt, but also engaged in trying to get them to pump salt back from the mines. So, like, who knows if the Bonneville salt flats will be there in 20 years. This year was the first year that when you looked at the salt, you could see through the salt crust and see the dirt below.
Oh, wow.
But they haven't pumped because there hasn't been the reason was there hasn't been enough rain. So, yeah, the records are tricky. The surface is tricky. You'll go out there and the surface will feel like asphalt, or it'll feel like a slushy. Just depends on how dry it is.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of it where you can tell that it's like, man, like it literally looks like it's just like slush sometimes.
Yeah, I've been out there on slush before. It's not
fun.
Cool. Yeah.
So, like, stupid question. What happens when you get that hat dirty? Like, can you send you another one?
Yeah, you're free to buy another hat.
Oh, okay.
It's like it's a lifetime thing. You could get a
all
replacement.
right. I just made.
I tell you, it's cool.
Yeah, if it's
like, I figured it's one of those things. Like, damn, like, what happens if you lost it or like something happened to it? Like, damn, I can't get that hat back.
I was out there. Last year is probably one of the most special things I have gotten to experience in the club. Is I was having a meal, and an older guy came over. He's in his like late 70s, and he says, "I want to talk to you about your hat." And he starts talk. He's also got a blue hat, and he got in like 92 or something. And he's talking to me, and I'm looking in his eyes while he's talking to me, and he's right back in it. It's a glory moment. When you do a flying mile at that speed, your brain is exposed to something that's the only place you can get it.
Yeah.
Like you've gone fast before. You know what it feels like. Like it's a vibe, right?
Yeah.
So take that vibe and spread it out over a big period of time. It's pretty cool.
Pretty big dopamine.
Yeah,
Wicked.
It's a pretty big dopamine hit. So it took me a little while to get right after the first time driving the liner. I was turned out.
Yeah.
It's like wake up in the morning, just like
nothing else is going to compare to that.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And then closing it up, my last question: what does RS Garage stand for? What does RS stand for?
I think it has to be Real Street.
Okay.
Yeah, because my last name gets botched so much. It was the original
I almost
reason.
botched it. I almost botched it.
It was
anyway.
the original reason why I didn't open. Are you ready for it? Meagher Performance, right? So that would have been that. So Real Street was a class. Real Street was a class that basically got me started in Real Street because I ran my Mustang. It was another guy, John O'Brien. He had a Mustang. We were racing it in NMRA Real Street. That's how I met John. He came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to build a car?" And we raced that car together. And then when John stopped racing the car, he gave it to me for a song, and I ran the car. And then the premise behind the class Real Street was fixed blower pulleys, fixed camshaft size, 100 octane fuel. It was a class that was really locked down, that the advantages would only be had through gray areas and innovation. So it was a competitive class. Like when you go to World Cup and you've got 16 cars all within a couple tenths, it's really impressive racing.
Yeah, it is. That's when it's fun.
That was the Real Street class.
Okay.
So then when Real Street Performance, that was like an easy one for me. And then when that came to an end, it's like I have my notoriety. I've been in the industry for a long time. And I told the guys, they said, "Hey, you're out of here." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, this is what I'm going to do." I told them what I was going to do. And I guess if any of them really had a problem with it, they could have done something as
like a no compete.
Well, no, I wasn't signing that. They could have just gone on Sunbiz and registered RS Garage.
Right.
Like they could have
backdoored
tried
you
to
kind
blocked it. But I think that, there wasn't it's not a situation with those guys that there's malintent. It's just a shitty divorce. We're just going through a shitty divorce.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, it happens. So
it happens more than people realize, I think, in these industries, especially when you have multiple partners, personalities. Like you said, you guys were together for so long.
Yeah.
It gets to a point, times change, and as when there are bad times, it puts people in shitty situations.
I can argue I did it to myself though, because they all really got fixated on being rich men, and between what I had started to experience in sustainable joy and having fun being a dad and being around at Bonneville, I'm privy to all these old guys, and I say, hey, like, what do I need to know in 20 years? And I listen when they talk. And when I started to really think about what the last section of my life would be like, being rich wasn't really high on my priorities, because it wasn't going to work. So they all wanted to be rich guys, and I was just a dumb mechanic. So when they really started to form their opinion, and I started to understand their opinion, I said, okay, like,
You saw the writing on the wall.
saw the writing on the wall. The only thing that sucked about it is they got what they wanted, and it wasn't enough. It's like, I don't know what version. I think that if I would have left there a little bit more mentally broken down, maybe I would have folded up or started drinking a lot, and I would have just disappeared and gotten out of their way. But, one of the things that stinks for that company now is in the segment, there was only one front man. Titan never really formed a front man. MAP never formed a front man. A lot of these other companies, they never formed a front man. So they formed a front man, but they didn't really understand the value in that. Like, if it were me, I would have probably just let me run my clock out there, because I thought, based off of the legacy of the company, that I had earned that position. Because for the large majority of the time that company was operating, it was solely in my name, because I'm the one that had the credit.
Right.
And I'm the one that had the stability to start the business, because those guys, when we got together, they were coming out of a fairly unstable situation. But money is just money, and money doesn't have
Comes
money,
and goes.
Yeah, well, money and loyalty, like all the things that you've ever been worn through 90s rap music about money, it kind of comes true.
More money, more problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah, it's just a ride, man.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then again, like, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
It's probably the best for you.
No, I tell you, I will never sit in another board meeting with a bunch of dudes that are trying to get over on men with dirty hands ever again. I would rather help people learn that it's okay to work a dirty job, get paid a clean wage, than it is to try to punch keys around on a computer to take something from someone else. Like, I think I feel fortunate that that's my thing. And I grew up. You walk into a store as an auto mechanic, we kind of all wear the same clothes. Our hands look the same way. And you get people, they look at you, and they look down on you a certain way. And that sucks, because those are the guys that are fixing the problems that everyone relies on.
Yeah.
So like, whoever makes your electricity come to your house, when you take a crap and you push the flusher on the toilet, like, a lot of men did, like, those guys are out there working, earning a wage, doing those jobs. So it's like, it's I think that if I could do anything else in the rest of my time, it would be helping people that are in trade level work come comfortable and accomplished as early on as possible. Focus on your ethics. Focus on the quality of work that you're putting out there, and don't feel bad that you
That you're
you
working
may have
this-
some dirt on your jeans
Right.
at the end of the day.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
Is there any other form of racing that you would like to get into? Like you're already at Bonneville, so what about Pikes Peak? Is that something that interests
I'm
you
not
in
a
the
good enough
future?
driver.
No?
No, I would like to help with calibration, but I am not jumping something off a mountain.
No.
I've stood at my shop. I have a big picture of Ken Block
With the dropping a
slinging that
tire.
Mustang around, and I've been in that. I've stood on that corner at Pikes Peak, and I'm like, no, that's not for me. I got to drive a pretty fast boat a few weeks ago. That was pretty interesting. I think that stick shift drag racing is probably the thing I'm the
Looking
single
forward
most
to.
passionate about. The land speed thing, I just get the double dip because you're out in nature, killer group of people, a lot of speed for a long period of time. You get to learn about engines, the durability of an engine.
Yeah.
Like you could buy an engine dyno and you've got access to this 300 or 500 gallon water tank, and you could sustain the water temp. And if you're smart, you've got that much intercooler available, and you could do some neat durability testing on a dyno. But it's a simulator, and there's going to be guys that are into playing video games, and there's going to be guys that are into racetracks.
Yeah.
And the stuff that I've learned at Bonneville to be able to apply that into
Drag race.
customer projects, I don't know if it was Job or Job's dad, but he always would say like fuse length. You got a 660-foot fuse.
Say that all
You got a
the time.
1320 fuse. You got a 5280 fuse. Like how long is the fuse in that engine?
Right.
Sometimes you miss it. There was a pass the other day, GTR R32, and I think it went 620 or 630, but you could see it's 100 foot.
Yeah.
It was over. I mean, I blew up Jared Holt's car one time. I blew it up, man. It was like 1,200 feet. I said, this thing is done running. And it was blown up. I went through the traps sideways on fire at night.
I think I remember seeing that.
We never posted the video.
No, it wasn't at
Oh,
was it at
saw
World
me-
Cup
you-
one time?
You saw me push a head gasket out at Indy where I was sideways on coolant.
Okay.
No,
yes.
The first time I blew that thing up, I blew it up twice pretty gloriously. The first time, it was like left eyeball was fire, right eyeball was guardrail, and I thought for sure I was into some shit.
Yeah.
And I called my wife on the way home. I said, had a problem with the car. I said, almost crashed it. She said, well, you're not dead. I said, all right. Just kept driving home.
Yeah.
She won't ever understand.
No, it's funny you use the fuse analogy because I kind of been telling people that before. Like even guys try to change some stuff around for like durability on engines, and I'm like, dude, it's like all you guys are doing is just moving that fuse to a different different spot.
Yeah.
And now the other thing too is like when guys, like you were saying, some guys will say, oh, the way to fix certain classes is change them from quarter mile to eighth mile. It's like, well, they'll just figure out a way to shorten the fuse.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what ends up happening. That's why it's funny you say that with the fuse because it's 100% true, I think.
No, a lot can be learned, for if you're getting into engine tuning or you're looking for longevity, look at how the OEMs did it.
Yeah.
Like when you look at, I always use the Mitsubishi Evo because the Evo is it's a fast burn engine. I don't know what the 10s are like, but the earlier cars, not a lot of timing.
Yeah.
You're talking 0 to 12 stock compression, and they just drown the thing in fuel.
Yeah.
And that's the way they keep it alive.
Yeah,
and at Bonneville, like in the Motec, there's a load average percentage. So the longer it stays at a load, the softer the tune-up can get.
Okay.
And if you, the smart guys, and I had a takeaway years ago with a guy, his name's Billy Glidden. Billy Glidden's a badass dude.
Nitrous racer.
Oh my God. Billy Glidden would run his car and he'd run the nitrous for 2.5 or 3 seconds. He'd mop up. As soon as the short track, as soon as it would take it, he'd give it to it. And as soon as the majority of the ET was gained, he'd shut it off. And he would have good longevity. There's not a lot of power left in the last 100 feet. If you're running it hard in the last 100 feet, you're just causing the expenses to go up.
Yeah.
You have to soften things up.
That's what a lot of guys say. It's like usually most of the damage occurs in that tail end there, be it the last 100 feet
Right,
in
but the temperatures, even though you're only racing for 1,320 feet, the temperature, you never, from the burnout box to the finish line, you haven't sustained one temperature. All of your temperatures are just increasing.
It's going up.
So you go out to Bonneville and you learn about water flow and water pressure and what happens to oil when it's sitting at 8,500 RPM for 40 seconds. You can learn a lot of stuff.
Or even water flow when, you know, you're accelerating at 300 miles an hour and the thing's just getting, you know, that you got head pressures and stuff like that.
Think about the guy. Think about your customer that's going to walk in there next week. He blows his engine up. How did you blow the engine up? What were you doing? Yeah. Well, he the one time that month he finally got it in high gear. That's when he broke it.
Yeah.
And he didn't have a long enough fuse, you know? So, but there's things you can do to build a longer fuse in where you don't have to give up power to get there. Most of the OEMs, the way that they did it is we're going to drown the thing in fuel and it's going to make less power. That's why when you bought it, back in the day, when you bought an Evo, you brought it to Joey's flash tuning service. The first thing he did was lean it out. It picked up 50 horsepower.
Yeah, and
now
put a couple degrees in it. And
you just took away all that longevity that the OEMs, you took away all the fuse length.
That cushion you had there.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, Jay, thanks for stopping by for this conversation. Drop your social so everyone can follow.
It's just my name. That and RS Garage. So,
we got Ricky CLM, Hugo ESR. Thanks for watching this podcast or listening. If any of you guys like, subscribe, share. That's it. It's a wrap.
Thank you.